After 2 weeks, the Washington Commanders look like a team at war with itself, and a collapsing offense is at the middle of it all. That and more right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders. I am David Harrison, your guy on the ground covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9, and I'm right here with you 5 days a week. You can also find me writing about the Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. Follow me on X at DHarrison82, and I want to thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or your first view today, and to the everydayers who come through for every single episode. A special thank you goes out to you for coming through for this one. Again, if it's your first time here, welcome to the show. Hopefully you like what you hear enough and you come back again real soon. Coming up on today's episode, we're going to take a look at the Washington Commanders through 2 games. So not a lot to look at here, but enough of a sample size to talk about who they are right now compared to who they were in 2024. And we're going to go through a litany of things, including specifics and also projections moving forward. All of that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're going to start off with the offense's identity crisis. The Commanders' offense isn't just struggling, it's fundamentally broken. It's repeating the same strategic errors from last season with an offensive line that so far simply just can't protect its quarterback. So what has happened to the championship caliber offense that we saw there at the end of the Washington Commanders 2024 season? That's really the big question here. And I think that there's also there's an important caveat to bring to this. Again, we're talking about the post, after the first 2 weeks of the season, we have a little bit of extra time, so we have time to kind of do this. So the big caveat, the big grain of salt to take in here too is, of course, it's only been 2 weeks. So while a lot of this is going to sound negative, a lot of this is going to sound definitely as a detraction to what we saw last year, it all needs to be kind of seen through the it's only been 2 weeks lens, right? But head coach Dan Quinn did emphasize before the season began that, quote, as fun as last year was, I don't think an identity is fully formed in 1 year. Beginning this Sunday, it's about how we play, end quote. And of course, that was leading into the game against the New York Giants, a game that the Washington Commanders won, but offensively did not look completely in sync, did not necessarily look fully like the team that you think they would want to be. And certainly there were some things that were left to be desired coming out of that week. Now, through 2 weeks, it's best described as a full-blown identity crisis, right? After the week 2 loss, Dan Quinn admitted, quote, I just felt like we didn't find the rhythm that we needed to, really, from Jump Street, end quote. I think everybody watching that game would agree. They felt sluggish. They felt slow, disconnected, simply not on the same page, certainly not aggressive and looking for explosive opportunities the way that a Dan Quinn head coach team would want to be, the way that a team quarterbacked by Jayden Daniels would want to be, and certainly not an offense that you would associate with an offensive coordinator like Cliff Kingsbury. So just a lot of disconnect, and that's where, again, the identity crisis kind of comes in, right? The run game has been essentially inconsistent, right? Week 1 versus the Giants, the offensive line physically manhandled that Giants defensive front, one that Cliff Kingsbury said probably going to be one of the best, if not the best, that they see all season. I think the Green Bay Packers maybe heard that, took a little bit of exception to it, came out to prove him wrong, and they certainly did. But against the Giants, Commanders' offensive line created huge lanes, specifically on key plays, sprung Croskey-Merritt for a total of 82 yards, a 6-yard touchdown run, certainly helped out by the tight ends as well. And simply put, the Commanders' offensive front, whether it be the linemen or the tight ends or a combination of both, were winning at the point of attack, imposing their will, so to speak. Week 2 against the Packers, just didn't happen, right? And Packers head coach Matt LaFleur said after the game, quote, it didn't seem like they ran the ball very effectively either, end quote. And yeah, it comes from your opponent, so it's a little bit, stings a little bit more, but I think it's incredibly true. The film just backs it up, right? The Commanders' interior offensive line was getting pushed back consistently, failed to create any movement throughout the night. And so ultimately, why is this run game being as inconsistent as it is? Well, because the offensive line show that they can dominate lesser opponents. Listen, I didn't get completely disrespectful about the New York Giants defensive line, but I said multiple times, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Abdul Carter, they're known as great pass rushers. Dexter Lawrence is known as a great all-around defensive tackle. But outside of that, in the defensive front 7 especially, the Giants just don't have a whole lot of depth. They don't have a whole lot of well-rounded players. And that showed, I think, in week 1. And it's pretty much what we expected. The Green Bay Packers are a different animal. The Green Bay Packers, as noted during the game broadcast, were a top 5 defense in the National Football League last year. Then they've added Micah Parsons. They got a little bit more continuity between the staff and the roster and everything else. So that's what you're seeing kind of early on here. We talk about defenses starting off ahead of offenses and all this other stuff and a lot of these cliches. Well, at the end of the day, the Green Bay Packers just as a team are starting off ahead of the power curve, I think, compared to a lot of other people. The good news is you got more time to kind of come to grips with that. You got more time to get on that same page. And certainly by the time the Commanders see the Packers next time, it could be a different story. But right now, the offensive line simply is dominating the units that you're supposed to dominate. But when it comes to playing a stout defensive front, simply just not effective enough. And the inefficiency stems from the inability to win the physical battle inside. Next up, we got situational regression and pass protection collapse, right? We're staying in the trenches, but kind of shifting gears just a little bit. The offense has regressed from a very impressive or very, at least respectable 45.6% third down conversion rate in 2024. So far through 2 weeks, that conversion rate is 33.3% in 2025, which we've said many times on this show, 33% is the bare minimum. That is the floor. Nobody's going to give you a sticker for converting a third of your third down conversion attempts, right? Pass protection is a weakness that we saw the team give up last season. They gave up 56 sacks this season. It might be even worse. So looking at the film again, the team has allowed 7 sacks in 2 games. That's on pace for 59.5 sacks this year, up from 56 last year. And we saw what the Washington Commanders did in the offseason, going out and trading for Laramie Tunsil, using a first-round draft pick to make that unit better. Yes, they're still missing Sam Cosmi. They moved Brandon Coleman inside, but right now, at least through 2 weeks, again, it's just simply not better. LaFleur, again, after the game on Thursday night, said, quote, getting a lot of pressure on a really good quarterback. It seemed like they were hitting him, talking about his own guys hitting Jayden Daniels quite a bit. I know he had 4 sacks and like 8 pressures or whatever it was, end quote. And yeah, it was 4 sacks and 8 pressures, Coach LaFleur. So what that is ultimately creating, Daniels is under consistent pressure on critical downs, those third downs. The line is losing one-on-one matchups on the outside, getting confused by stunts on the inside. And this is killing drives, and it's explaining the massive drop in third down efficiency. We talked about it in the last episode, talked about it briefly here. I wrote about it for CommanderGameDay.com on Sports Illustrated. 3rd and 3, you're in Packers territory. It's 14-3 at the time, third quarter, and Josh Connolly Jr. just gets beat right off the line by Micah Parsons, gets a holding penalty, which allows another defender to get to Jayden Daniels along with Micah Parsons. They both shared the sack, and the Washington Commanders end up backing up for 4th down. Matt Gay misses the field goal. No guarantee he would have made it, from that 3rd and 3 spot if Jayden could at least get rid of the ball either. But you just never had a chance to convert that 3rd down if you're Jayden Daniels because of the way the pressure got in just essentially immediately. So those things definitely have to get cleaned up. And it's why we're seeing, we're seeing that situational regression on third downs because of the pass protection collapse. And we're seeing that running game become very inconsistent because the offensive line so far through 2 weeks has been basically Jekyll and Hyde. It was really good 1 week, especially in the run blocking. And then the next week just absolutely took a major step backwards. I guess week 3 will be that third game, the rubber match, whatever you want to call it, to see what the mean is going to be. But while the offense looks completely lost, the biggest reason for optimism in Washington is happening on the other side of the ball, where the team's biggest 2024 weakness has so far become a legitimate strength, though that strength certainly is now threatened to be weakened again due to a critical injury. That and more coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Prize Picks. And with football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and the fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, and you can do it all in less than 60 seconds. I've been playing Prize Picks, and it's a great way to put what we're seeing on film to the test. After breaking down Washington's offensive line struggles, you can decide if Jayden Daniels will have more or less on his rushing yards projection in week 3. And with the run game's identity crisis, you can make the call on whether Croskey-Merritt Bill is going to go for more or less on his total rushing yards. Plus, for today's games on September 14th, Prize Picks has a max discount on Travis Kelce at just 0.5 receiving yards. So if you got in on that before Sunday afternoon, then that was fairly easy decision for you to make, right? Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. a tale of two defenses. That's what we've seen in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, two different teams essentially on the offensive side of the ball, but especially again on the defensive side of the ball. The Commanders' defense has successfully fixed its most critical flaw from last season, but some old habits on the perimeter and a complete inability to generate takeaways is obviously threatening to undermine that progress, as is the injury to Dietrich Wise Jr., feared loss for the season with a torn quadricep. That is being reported by some very reliable sources, confirmed by some other sources, but the team has yet to confirm. We get to talk to Dan Quinn on Monday afternoon, so expect as early as Monday afternoon to get confirmation on not just Wise, but also Austin Eckler's injury, and then obviously Jayden Daniels and the reports that his knee is bothering him are going to be main topics of conversation for Dan Quinn on Monday, obviously. So let's get to a reason for optimism. And again, even this reason for optimism has a little bit of a dark cloud over it with the injury to Dietrich Wise Jr., but we're going to just kind of evaluate the last 2 weeks and we'll see what the rest of the season holds. Right now, the run defense overhaul, for what it's worth, has been very successful so far. The most legitimate reason for optimism is that drastic improvement of the run defense, proving that the team can identify and it can fix its most critical flaws when it gets the right people in there. Now, before the season, defense coordinator Joe Witt Jr. said, quote, "I envision that we're going to be much improved in the run area," end quote. He also added to it that he felt like the pass rush was going to be able to at least maintain their level of production from last year. So far, the Washington Commanders' run defense has been solid, and why there's still reason for optimism moving forward, even with the Dietrich Wise Jr. injury, is because the interior has been very, very solid, and obviously Dietrich Wise Jr. primarily is going to play on the edge. He does move inside every once in a while, but primarily he's going to be out there on the edge as a DN, right? In week one, that was more evident, right? The film shows the game brought, like everybody knows, defensive tackle Daron Payne and that interior line, Javon Kinlaw, et cetera. They were just immovable, especially on the goal line, plugged every gap. After that game, the Giants game, DQ said, quote, "In the run game on both sides, and our first time at it, we hit a lot of the marks that we wanted to," end quote. Obviously, week two, they didn't hit those marks nearly as well, or, I mean, if we're just being blunt, honestly, at all, because old weaknesses are remaining kind of where they were before, especially on the perimeter, right? So the defense has been dominant these first 2 weeks, even against Green Bay Packers. Honestly, it was very good against inside runs, but they have looked incredibly vulnerable on the perimeter, a weakness that opponents have identified and now starting to exploit, something that we saw the Philadelphia Eagles exploit last year. Even the Detroit Lions in the playoff win the Commanders had over them in the divisional round last year, there were some perimeter runs that they were able to use and use well. So why is the edge vulnerable? Well, mostly it's a breakdown in discipline. That's really what it's been about. And really a lot of the struggles that we've seen from the Washington Commanders have been a breakdown in discipline, whether it's penalties, whether it's drops due to lack of concentration, whether it's, being in the wrong place in your pass blocking set or your run blocking lane on defense, tackling or being in sound coverage, et cetera, et cetera. Just a lot of it boils down to just doing your job and being disciplined out there on the field. On outside runs, defensive ends are getting sealed inside a lot of times. Linebackers are then over pursuing the play, trying to help the defensive ends, and then that creates wide open cutback lanes. We diagrammed that immensely last season. I always go back to that first Saquon Barkley touchdown run on that Thursday night game in the middle of the season there, where Dorrance Armstrong Jr., who's been very solid this season, but in this situation, he's pursuing from the backside and basically is saying, "I'm going to get out ahead of my teammates to try to help them on the edge against Saquon Barkley." Saquon sees a massive lane behind the pursuit where Dorrance Armstrong should be, cuts it back, runs up inside, runs for the touchdown untouched, and essentially sparked the comeback that the Philadelphia Eagles used to win that first game after the Commanders entered the fourth quarter with a lead. So that's the big reason why this is happening on the edge. It continues to be a problem, and I think a lot of it comes from the linebackers' inability, I should say, to trust the edge containment. But at the same time, someone's got to make the smart play and at least seal off that backside coverage. Next up from the defense, so we go from a little bit of an encouragement. At least the inside run game is certainly looking more stout, and even with the injury to Dietrich Wise Jr., that could potentially continue to be the trend there on the defensive line. But the takeaway drought. Takeaways, look, Dan Quinn, when he took over this team, said that's going to be something we're going to harp on. Joey Jr. said that's absolutely something to harp on. And it's just not something that's happened. It hasn't happened. It didn't happen last season with a whole lot of success. There were games where it happened. There were kind of spurts, stretches where they got a lot of takeaways. But for the most part, from a consistency standpoint, just not a lot of takeaways happening. That's continued into 2025. and has led to some pass defense vulnerabilities. The defense has 0 takeaways through 2 games this season. In the secondary, Quan Martin has been repeatedly kind of at the scene of the crime for a lot of these defeats. However, just like we kind of outlined last week, there's multiple plays here where Quan Martin's kind of left in a no-win situation where he's got 2 guys that he needs to try to cover. The one that he doesn't cover is the one the ball is going to. And then what you're going to see on the television screen is number 20 running for dear life, trying to catch up to the play. Well, again, he can't split himself in 2. He can't be in 2 places at once. So the scheme's got to kind of help him out just a little bit. And that's not to say that Quan Martin has been perfect outside of scheme misgivings. It's just to say that I think Quan Martin has been seen at the scene of a lot of these crimes because of the scheme versus more so what he's done or not done as a safety. So there's a combination of 2. Both things can be held accountable, but the scheme, at the end of the day, every coach will tell you, man, the scheme has got to be sound, because if the scheme's not sound, you can't ask your players to go out there and be sound as a unit, right? Why are there no takeaways? Well, Joe Jr., again, the defensive coordinator, acknowledged that it was a prove-it area before the season, because he said that they were getting takeaways in practice. We saw takeaways in practice during training camp. He said that was continuing into the season. And he said that he had confidence because last year they weren't getting takeaways in practice, but they also weren't getting them in the game. So this year they're starting to get them in practice. So hopefully they're going to start getting them in games. He said, quote, "Am I confident that it will translate to the game? I am. All right. But until we do it and do it on a consistent basis, it's still up in the air, but we have to do it," end quote. Well, they haven't done it. And I fully expect that when we hear from Joe Jr. on Thursday before the Raiders game, that he's going to tell us that he's not happy about the lack of takeaways. I don't know how they're going to fix it, but it's going to come up, and he's not going to be very happy about it. 57-yard completion in week 2 from Jordan Love to tight end. Tucker Kraft is a prime example. Again, Quan Martin gets caught in no man's land. He's got Luke Musgrave on an early up the field. It's kind of an over route, but he's coming up. He's beating his defender over the top. And then Quan Martin, unbeknownst to him, as he's following Luke Musgrave up the field to protect him over the top, Tucker Kraft is beaten, I guess, Bobby Wagner. For me, it looks like Bobby Wagner's in kind of a middle of the field type of hook zone, and probably should have followed Tucker Kraft. He turns around, points upfield at a safety who's not there because he was covering another man's deep route guy, right? But what you end up with on that play is you end up with 4 deep routes by the Green Bay Packers, 3 deep defenders. So again, you can't expect 3 deep defenders to cover 4 guys. That's just not how this works. And the Green Bay Packers end up with a wide open look and a 57-yard gain. And Tucker Kraft's career night was off and running on the second possession of the game. Defensive backs, though, they're playing reactively out there. That's kind of the other part of this. There doesn't seem to be a lot of confidence in what they're running. There doesn't seem to be a lot of aggression in what they're running. They're not playing downfield. They're very much just kind of reacting to what the offense is doing. And if you're going to go get takeaways, if you're going to produce, you have to be out there in a productive mindset. You can't be out there in a reactive mindset. Reactions never produce, right? You have to go out there and be aggressive, and it's just not happening. And it just kind of speaks to a defense that maybe isn't necessarily comfortable in the scheme, or a scheme that isn't comfortable in allowing his guys to kind of fire off. They're just kind of out there knowing that they have a single point of failure. And when you are in that situation, you kind of feel like you have to make sure you protect the worst case scenario versus going and attacking the best case scenario, if that makes sense. So beyond the unit-wide trends, the Commanders are being plagued by self-inflicted wounds and individual liabilities that are directly costing them points and field position. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all turn to some funny places for advice, but for real support, BetterHelp is here. With over 30,000 licensed therapists, BetterHelp has got your back. Watching the Commanders defense, well, it can be stressful. You see the progress with the run defense, then you get hit with the frustration from the lack of takeaways. I've caught myself venting to friends and family who mean well, but they're not trained. They're not therapists, right? BetterHelp makes it easy for you to find a professional. You start with a simple questionnaire, and if it's not the right fit with the person you get matched with, you can switch therapists at any time and no extra cost, no questions asked. And as the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. So find one with BetterHelp. Our listeners, you get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Today's episode is also brought to you by Upside. Are you still playing paying full price for gas. Stop leaving money behind at the pump. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Honestly, after watching the Commanders' run defense in week 1, kind of felt a little bit too good to be true compared to last season. Definitely wanted to come in week 2 being like, all right, let's confirm what we saw in week 1. That's how I felt about the Upside app as well, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid for buying gas that they already need, and you can cash out anytime to your bank account, to PayPal, or in the form of an e-gift card anytime you want. Download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use a limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas that you already need to buy with Upside. So again, go to the pump, get your money back on the gas you have to buy anyway with the promo code TOUCHDOWN on the free Upside app. Discipline, dependability, and a player stock profile. That's how we're going to wrap up today's episode. Looking back at the first 2 weeks of the Washington Commanders, compared to what we thought we knew, compared to what we thought we were going to get. And so far, there's been a crippling lack of discipline from the Washington Commanders, from key veterans, young guys, just all around. Complete failure in the kicking game. Certainly always frustrating. I've covered a lot of teams with a lot of kicking coverage or kicking problems. And it just seems to be the most frustrating thing for a fan base. And I'm hearing it from you guys. I get it. They're controllable problems, man, that separate average teams from good ones, especially the pre-snap penalties. The kicking game, I think that it's controllable in the sense that, when we go back to the preseason, man, we go back to training camp. I told you guys, I didn't know why they didn't have competition for Matt Gay. Matt struggled at times in camp. The question was brought up, are you to a point where you're concerned? DQ said he wasn't. They didn't bring in competition. Is it the only reason the Washington Commanders lost against Green Bay Packers? No, it's not. But at one point in time, this game, even if you aren't scoring touchdowns, should have been 14-9 instead of 14-3. And certainly that's a whole different type of ball game when you're looking at it, objectively. So crippling lack of discipline is one of the negative trends that we're seeing here with this Washington Commanders team early on. And again, this whole thing needs to be put through the lens of it's only week 2. So it's not. Nobody should be hitting any panic buttons, right? But this is what we're seeing through 2 weeks. So we're just being honest. Dan Quinn talks about Tell the Truth Monday. This is our Monday episode. So we're going to tell the truth through 2 weeks. That's what we're seeing. And we're also seeing a crippling lack of discipline after week 1's penalty fest, which DQ is obviously frustrated about, saying, quote, to have to be lapped in penalties 2-1. Not what we're looking for, man. End quote. These aren't just all ticky-tack calls. I know some people don't agree with every call. Nobody's ever going to agree with every call. But the thing about it is all these opponents are playing, right? The Giants are playing the same officiating crew. The Packers are playing the same officiating crew. And actually, the Commanders came out better on the penalty side against Green Bay Packers. But these are clear drive-altering mistakes from veterans like Marshawn Lattimore. So you have the young guys, okay, but the veterans, you don't have as much patience for them as well. New worsening concern we just talked about, right, is that kicking game, man. Matt Gay, 2 field goal misses in week 2. Those are a huge difference. You're talking about a 9-point loss. I know one of those touchdowns was scored in kind of garbage time, right? But you're talking about a 9-point loss, like it keeps you in the game. You got to be able to convert those field goals. The first one was wide right. The second one doinked off the upright. Very makeable 43-yarder. I mean, that 43-yarder could have been made by Zane Gonzalez or Austin Cyber, any of the other kickers that were on the team last year. Matt Gay was brought in to make the deep shots, make the bombs, make the 50-plus yarders, things like that. He missed one of those as well. So, I would love to sit here and tell you that at this point, the Commanders have to bring in competition for the kicker or bring in a whole new kicker altogether. But this everydayers, I've been there already. I've been at least competition, right? I'm never necessarily going to advocate for just release the dude and just completely scrap it. Like bring in competition, see who the best guy is, bring in a practice squad kicker and, decide on game day, which one's the guy that we're going to roll with. And we're going to make that guy active. But we'll see. We'll see what the Washington Commanders decide to do, man. I don't know what they're going to do. So we'll see on Monday, and then we'll see specifically on Wednesday. DQ may just very well decide to kind of keep that under wraps until Wednesday when obviously we get out to the practice field. Player stock watches. I think Jayden Daniels stock is still pointed up. I know that the completion percentage has been low. I know that the overall performance has not been great. I know there's a lot of concern about his knee. Reports that or opinions, I should say. There are no reports because we haven't seen him in practice, but opinions by some that he could play with a brace on his left knee. We'll see what it is. I'm not going to come out here and speculate too much on a guy's health. We'll get reports when we get them. and we'll move forward with that when we can. But I think that, Dan Quinn has kind of described Jayden as having quote unquote rare focus. I think that's really been demonstrated even through these struggles. No turnovers. Jayden isn't coming out here and just making desperation throws that are just putting the team in even worse situations and bad ones. He's protecting the football. And I think at the end of the day, that's the minimum that a quarterback needs to do to be a franchise quarterback. And for a young guy, you typically don't see that. So I think that Jayden Daniels, even though the numbers haven't been there, when you look at his play, when you look at his poise and mentality, the signs are all there that, look, let's get this other stuff figured out, give him a little bit better pass protection somehow, start scheming up ways to get these receivers open more, maybe anticipate some of the things that defenses are going to do against us better, and you can see the Washington Commanders get their quarterback off the ground. Stock down. Again, I'm going to go with Quan Martin, right? But again, I don't think that it's all on Quan. I think he's just the deep safety, free safety that gets caught up in a lot of these bad schematic designs and a lot of these bad play calls that are just setting him and the rest of the secondary up for failure, on top of some of the other systemic things that are happening with blown coverages and penalties and all that stuff. I think the coverage overall, for what it can be, has been solid. But again, like I said, when you have 4 receivers running deep and 3 DBs back there, I mean, I don't know what you want a guy to do, right? Stock up Dorrance Armstrong. He's been the most consistent pass rusher so far this season. He's had a sack in each of the first 2 games, puts him on pace for 17 sacks this season, of course, which would top his previous career high. I would actually double it. His previous career high is 8.5. So he's on pace to double his previous career high. Joey Jr. called him a quote unquote complete football player and quote unquote one of the leaders on his defense before the season began. Dorrance Armstrong is a guy we talked about all offseason. A lot of pressures, a lot of backfield penetration, just not a lot of finishing. This season, at least through 2 games, he's starting to finish, and it's a great sign for the future of him, and also a great sign for something that's going to help the defense go a long way moving forward. So again, finally, look, it's 2 games. It hasn't been a great 2 games. Got it, but it's still only 2 games, guys. We have 15 games left to go this season, so try not to get too wrapped up in the negativity. We're just telling the truth here, and there are a lot of things that need to be worked on, of course, from this Washington Commanders team. But again, good news is they're working on it this week. They're going to continue to work on it every single week, and this team certainly still has the potential to do some really good things moving forward. I was talking to an insider who said that they think the Green Bay Packers, the way that Green Bay Packers team came out from staff to offense to defense, special teams, just kind of humming, man, clicking on all cylinders. You look at that Detroit Lions game they played, they were doing the same thing there. This Packers team, I think, maybe has come out the gate better than any team in the National Football League, which could feasibly make them the toughest competitor this Washington Commanders team is going to see all season long. I don't think it's necessarily outside the realm of possibility that we just saw them play the best team that they're going to play from a contextual standpoint throughout the season. And still, at the end of the day, even though, yes, a somewhat garbage time touchdown, although it wasn't true garbage time touchdown, they lost by 8 points and had some opportunities to put other points up on the board. Lost by 9 points and had opportunities. There's a silver lining there. It's a moral type of silver lining, certainly not one you want to latch onto, but it is there. That's going to do it for today's episode. Next time on Locked On Commanders, we will have heard from head coach Dan Quinn. We'll get some updates on injuries. We'll see what's what with all that stuff going on. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, you can text them to me directly by becoming a Locked On Commanders Insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Not only can you talk to me, I'm going to talk to you, give you whatever inside information I have, news, notes, analysis, live text from press conferences, games, etc., all season long. And the NFL season, of course, is here. Locked On NFL is twice per day. Tyler, the Madman Rowland in the morning, Tony Wiggins in the afternoon. I am with Tony every Wednesday afternoon. If you want to come through specifically for that episode and check it out, but I highly recommend you check out all the episodes. Again, Locked On NFL twice a week, keeping you locked in to the entire league on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. To the everydayers, I see you every day. I appreciate you every day, and I thank you especially for coming through today. Until next time, stay safe, be kind to one another. We'll talk again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.